My name is Goskin Koji Jeffrey, and I'm here to make a presentation on how primitive data types and reference data types are managed and accessed in memory. Now, what are data types? When we say a data type, what do we mean by that? Data types are classifications that define the type of data a variable can hold and how the computer will interpret its value. So, an example of a data type is the integer data type. The integer data type only holds integer values. So, an example of integer values include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. So, another example of a data type is the float data type, which holds only decimal values. So, that means that they are classified into the kind of data they can be stored. An integer data type cannot store what a float data type holds. That is basically the basic definition of data types. Now, when we come to data types again, we have two different types of data types. These are known as the primitive data types and the reference data types. Primitive data types examples include the integer, the float, the double, the char, the boolean. And reference data types example include the arrays, classes, objects, strings. All these examples are examples from Java, the Java programming language. Another difference between primitive and reference data type is that primitive data type stores the actual value of that data, and reference data type stores the address of the actual data in memory. So, whilst primitive data stores the actual value in memory, reference data type only points to where the actual value is being stored in memory. So because the reference data type does not really, store the actual value in memory but only points, it tends to be slower than the primitive data type. So another difference is that primitive data types are more faster than the reference data type. So what is the definition of primitive data type? Okay, a primitive data type is a fundamental kind of data used in programming. It holds a single value and isn't composed of any other data type. Example, integer, float, char, boolean. When we get to what do you call it? When we get to reference data type, you understand what I mean by it holds a single value and isn't composed of any other data type. So when we look at this image here, it's giving us, a clear example of what primitive data mean, or a basic definition of primitive data type. So you could see that we are being stored, we are storing the number 23 to memory location A in the computer, and we are saying A should be equal to 23, and then we are also saying again that B should be equal to A. So that means that now B is equal to 23 because A is equal to 23. But when we change the value of A to, let's say, 25, that does not mean that B is 25, because B is equal to A but A is not equal to B. So that's primitive data type. Now, primitive data type code example in Java. So this is a basic code in Java that illustrates primitive data type. So let's look at this. Say int. Say int age is equal to 25. As I said earlier on, int is an example of a data type that stores integer values. So integer values example is the 25, and the variable name is age. So age in the memory location is storing the value 25. So int is a primitive data type in that case. Double, height is equal to 5.9. In the previous example, I made mention of float, and I said float store decimal numbers. Well, double also stores decimal numbers, but then double stores to a certain extent, and float also stores to a certain extent. And yeah, so double height equal to 5.9. So this is also a primitive data type because it holds only one what only one single value. It's here. It says a primitive data type is a fundamental kind of data type used in programming. It holds a single value. So you could see that int is holding only one value, and double is also holding only one value. So therefore, we could term that as primitive data type. Now, Boolean, the variable name is student equal to true. As I said, Boolean is only true or false, statement. So this only also holds one, value, and so it's also a primitive data type. So now what we are telling the compiler to do is that it should print out age. So what this is going to print out is 25, and it's going to print out age and equals to 25. And this is also the next line here is also going to print out height is equal to 5.9, and this is also going to print out a student equal to true. Now let's take a look at reference data types. Reference data types are data types that hold the memory location of the actual data instead of directly storing the data itself. So reference data type does not store the data itself, but it only points to where the data is being stored in the memory location. And we normally term where the data is being stored in the memory location as heap. Yes, we normally term it as heap. Okay, so when we look at this example here, C is equal to an example of a reference data type could be an array, could be a stack, or a string. Okay, so an example in this illustration here is A is equal to 3, B is equal to 100. It's not a reference data type. This is a primitive data type. Now, the reference data types are C, D, and E. If you could see here, now I forgot to mention this, primitive data types are also being stored in our memory location known as the stack. So they use the stack, and the reference data type use what we call the heap. So as I said, reference data type only points to the memory location of the actual data instead of storing the data itself. So when we see over here, C is equal to an array, and the array holds values of 1, 99, 3, and 4 of index 0, index 1, index 2, and index 3. And this is pointing to it, so therefore it's a reference data type. It's pointing to the memory location, that is the array. And when we look at D is also pointing to a memory location, but this was not an array, this is a string. When we look at E is also pointing to another memory location, also known as a string. So we could classify that D and E are the same. They are all pointing to hello in the heap. They're all pointing to the memory location hello. Now, when we talk about string is what we call immutable. In reference data type, we call something immutable. What this means is that it can't change. If you want to change E, if you want to change the hello, E equal to hello, the E in the hello, we cannot do that. What we need to do is to change the E and assign it to a different string instead of hello. But if we come to C is equal to 1, the array. What we can do is that, as for that one, we can change the data inside this array. So I can say instead of C is equal to 199, 3 and 4, we can say C could be equal to 1, maybe 200, 5 and 6. But since this is not a string, we could change it. But if it's a string, it's immutable. We cannot change it. Okay, so reference data type code example in Java. So string name is equal to Camille. So we say string is a reference data type, and as I said, this string is immutable. It cannot be changed. And here again, int of an integer type. This integer type is an array. This is not a primitive data type, because this is an array. An array does not hold only one value. But primitive data types hold only one value, but in an array it does not hold only one data value. So this is known as a reference data type. So integer of an array max is equal to 85, 90 and 75. And over here the comment says array is also reference. System.out println name. So what this is going to do is that it's going to give us name and then semicolon Camille. System.out println is going to tell the compiler to print out or to display first mark, and it's equal to the max inside index 0, which is 85. So in summary, first mark semicolon 85. So comparison between access primitive data type and reference data type. So primitive data type, as we said, example, we said this earlier on. Example is the boolean, the byte, so many more, integer, float, double, and so on. Reference data type are unlimited, but there are so many types of reference data types. But in this lesson, we are only going to talk about, or most times we only talk about few of the examples of reference data types, like the arrays, the strings, and others. Yeah. So primitive data type, as we said earlier on, they store data, and reference data type, as we said earlier on, they only store the address to they only store the location to where the data is being pointed on the memory, also known as the heap, and the primitive is the stack. So can only hold one value, like integer of a variable name number equal to 5, only one value, or maybe boolean is hetal of a variable name equal to true, only one value, true. Could hold more than one value. So of an array example, maybe int of an array, let's say arr1, array1 equal to bracket 10, 5, 15, 20, close bracket. All these are more than one values in that array, so it's a reference data type. Since they can hold only one value, we tend them to be less memory, so the memory is very fast in that case, because they don't use more memory, they use only less memory, because they only hold one value. But because reference type hold more than one value, they tend to use more computer memory, and so since they use more computer memory, they are slow. Thank you very much, and this is the end of the slide. Thank you.